Good morning and welcome to my trailer. We're going to talk all about trailing houseplants today. We are here at Bates Nursery and Garden Center and it is Thursday morning. So trailing houseplants, a lot can be really easy. A lot of them are very good beginner houseplants. And then we'll move through what is, moderate in care and then plants that I would say you need more of a green thumb in order to take care of. Trailing plants can be a great addition to your houseplant collection. You can hang them from ceilings, I've hung mine from my curtain rod. You can just put them on a tall shelf and they're going to trail down. You can make curtains out of them. You can weave them. There's so many fun and exciting things that you can do with trailing houseplants. I'd say they're very versatile. And for a lot of them across the board, most of them like lower light. Now, when I say low light, I don't mean no light, but we will talk about it a little bit later. They do like to reach for light, which is going to make them trail more. Most of them do like to be tight in their pots, so you don't have to repot them as often as some of our more leafy, upright houseplants. So I'm going to go through a little tour of what I have here today. And as always, we will open the floor for questions throughout the webinar and at the end. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comment box on Facebook or in the chat box on Zoom, and we will get to those answers. I also have Tyler in the space with me today, who's wearing a matching Bates shirt, so we look like twins. There he
Green
is
team.
on the Tyler cam. All right, so just talking through what I have in front of me today, as far as easy care goes, I think most everybody is pretty familiar with pothos, which I have a marble queen right here to my right. Tyler's going to zoom in. So it's got some great variegation on the leaves. It's green and white. This one is pretty highly variegated, so very exciting. I would say this is one of the easier care houseplants. Now over here, I've got just our standard green trailing philodendron, the cordatum. And look at those nice little heart-shaped leaves. Oh, she's so pretty. I have one of these. It's actually the Brazil, which has yellow variegation, but the leaves are the same. That I'd say the little tendrils that hang down are probably about 7 feet long. So it is wild and it has grown so much in the 2 years I've had it. And then down in front, we've got Scindapsus exotica, which a lot of people will call this pothos. It does have larger leaves. This is one of my favorite houseplants across the board, but probably my top 2 favorite trailing houseplants that I own. And then the last one, as far as these big leafy trailers go, is our sterling silver Scindapsus. So you see the silvery leaves, very pretty, kind of unusual look. So those are going to be pretty simple trailing houseplants. I'm going to bring out the easiest one, though. Everyone has it. I know my grandma always had one. She would buy one in the spring, in the summer, keep it on her porch, and then bring it inside. She had huge ones all over her house. Tradescantia zebrina. So nice purple leaves. There's a lot of different kinds of Tradescantia out there. Some are all green, some green with white variegation, some solid purple. There's also some really, really neat pink ones. This is one of the easiest houseplants to take care of and also one of the easiest to propagate, which we will talk about towards the end of this segment. And it also will help other plants root quicker, I think. You might beg to differ, but I usually will stick it in with my cuttings. So as far as easy care houseplants, trailing houseplants go, I'd say these are the top easiest ones to grow. They require moderate watering, so they don't like to dry out for too long in between waterings, but they also don't want to stay wet. So you don't want to keep them in just like a container of water, basically. They can tolerate low-ish to medium light. They don't like a lot of bright sunlight, especially hot afternoon light. You want to keep them out of that. A lot of mine I have in a room that has a north-facing window, so they never receive direct light. And that's part of the reason why my Brazil philodendron that I spoke about a little bit earlier has gotten so long. So as they start to grow, they'll start reaching for the light. And if they don't have a lot of direct light or any direct light at all, they will reach a lot more, thus having a longer house plant. Now, if they're getting more light, they're going to stay a little bit bushier. And we'll go back to this marble queen. So this and the grow house where she was raised. She was probably grown up from a propagation from a little cutting. So they receive a lot of bright light. I mean, there was probably some shade cloth in there, so it wasn't a lot of direct light, but generally lots of light coming from on top of the plant. So those leaves are going to stay a little bit closer together as opposed to growing apart and making longer arms. So those are the easy care plants that I brought in. And again, if you have any questions on anything I'm talking about or any kind of trailing house plants, feel free to put them in the comment box and Tyler will feed me those questions. So we're going to move on to moderate care trailing house plants. Now I've got a Crimson Queen Hoya here in front, also called wax plant. The waxy leaves kind of hints the name. Also, when they flower, they have these cool little clusters that also look very waxy that are pretty small. Very impressive. I have rarely had a Hoya that blooms, but my best plant friend, Vanessa, sends me pictures of blooming Hoya constantly from her house in the greenhouse where she works. So shout out to Vanessa. Miss you. Love you.
Miss you.
Tyler misses you too. We all miss you here at Bates Nursery and Garden Center. So this one can be fairly easy, but it can be a little bit more finicky, I believe, than the pothos, than the philodendron, and the tradescantia. They're going to want a little bit more light than the pothos tradescantia that I was talking about. So I have mine getting some direct light in the morning, but it doesn't stay in hot afternoon sun, which might burn the leaves if it's not acclimated. Now I have put a rope Hoya outside in full sun when I had mealybugs on one, and it actually was able to handle that. The leaves did burn, but once those burnt leaves fell off, it actually pushed a lot of new growth. So they can handle sun, but you would want to acclimate them to that. So I would call that one a little bit more moderate. String of Hearts, which I'm going to bring up right here. Now some say this one is a hard to take care of house plant.
A heart one?
A heart one. Yes, Tyler. Tyler got me tickled, like always. So, I mean, honestly, this is one of my lowest maintenance houseplants that I have at my house. So String of Hearts, you'll notice the heart-shaped leaves, hence the name of this plant. It's also got these cute little purple blooms. I don't know if we can zoom in on that and take a look at it.
Try to the camera to your left, Caroline. Try holding it up
right there.
Yeah. Look to your left.
Yeah. There it is. We found it. So String of Hearts. Now, if you'll notice, this one has a little bit of like reddish purple coloring in it. Now, when it starts to get more sun, it will turn that red purple color. And then if it's not getting any direct sunlight, it'll be more of a silver color, which is what mine is at my house. I don't have it in any direct sun. And in the last, I'd say, this one that I'm talking about, I purchased probably in March, has grown about 4 feet at least since March, and is now from the ceiling of my dining room is trailing all the way down to the floor like a beautiful silver cascade. I water mine about once a week. Now watering is kind of dependent on the climate of your house, so you'll have to adjust that. However, your HVAC system is heating or cooling, how much sun it's getting, what have you. But this one can sit dry for longer. They actually like to dry out more than the pothos and the philodendron and the tradescantia. So this one is going to be a lot lower water, but it can handle more sunlight than the easy care plants that we discussed earlier. Now, another one I have that I would say is more of a moderate one, Ripsalis. Now, this one isn't going to trail as much as some other Ripsalis that are out there in the plant world. This is a very large family of plants. So you'll see this one's the dancing bones. It gets little yellow flowers. I have a Ripsalis at home. I call it mousetail. It has a lot of different names, but it is a great trailer. Now, this one, similar to the String of Hearts, can handle a lot more bright light or direct light than some of the easier care ones. But if it's getting a lot of direct sunlight, it will sun stress it, turning it red, which again is really pretty, and it's not going to kill your plant, but it is stressful to the plant in receiving that much sun, and it's going to cause it to have shorter growth, thus being a little bushier instead of trailing as much as you may want. So those two are great moderate houseplants if you feel like you're ready to step up your game with your houseplant care. Those two would be a great option. And then lastly, if I I can get it. Ooh, what? We've got this lipstick plant. So lipstick plant, goldfish plant, they kind of go hand in hand. They've got these really cool blooms. This one looks more like lipstick coming out of the plant, and then the goldfish looks like a little goldfish blooming. This is a great trailing plant. It likes to stay pretty similar to the watering habits for the ripsalis and the string of hearts, maybe a little bit more. You don't want to let it dry out quite as much because of the blooms. If it dries out a lot, the blooms will drop, but the rest of the plant will be fine. And one thing to note on this one that I just want to talk about really briefly is, I don't know if we can see that. Oh, we can see that on the leaf. So that's from being sunburnt. So as this season changes, as the sun is moving around in the sky and it's so hot outside, if your houseplants, even ones that can tolerate some full sun, are getting hit with a lot of direct light, you might want to shift them out of windows, or if they're outside, kind of pull them in, because it is hot right now and some of these plants will get sunburnt. Once plants do get sunburnt, there's no coming back on those leaves. So I usually remove them and then throw them away. All right. Do we have any questions yet before we move on to what I would say is a little bit harder, more green thumb plants?
No questions so far, but feel free to comment as we go along.
Well, I hope everyone's having a great day and having fun. And also, good morning. I don't think I said that. All right. Who's ready to move on to more green thumb trailing houseplants?
I am, for one.
Everybody. Yes. So in front of me, we've got string of bananas. Wow, look at her. Ooh, Tyler. I think this would make a great wig. I'm just going to say that.
Yes, it would.
So, succulents. Ooh, some people love them, some people hate them. Some people want to love them and just can't keep them alive. So when you look at this, you look at a succulent and you think, that's going to want a lot of sunshine. Not really the case. It wants a lot of bright light, yes, but you're not going to want to stick it outside in like a desert scape. It will burn. These don't sun stress quite as much as like the ripsalis and the string of hearts like I was speaking on earlier. These will pretty much just get sunburnt, turn yellow or white, and wither away. They can be pretty easy. They thrive on neglect. So if you've got a window that gets morning light or really, really, really late evening light, it's going to thrive and do really great. People's most, or the biggest mistakes people make with these plants is overwatering. And then, like I said, you think succulent is going to want a ton of light. Not true. They'll stick it out in just full sun. They'll water it too much. And for these, that's a recipe for a very quick death. Like a week or two, it's gonna just be gone. So this is string of bananas, and we have some really great ones here at the nursery right now. I wanted to buy some when they came in, but when you have over 200 houseplants, you really have to pick and choose which ones you take home. So similar to the string of bananas, we've got a string of tears, looks similar to a string of pearl. Now, string of pearls, I have people who come in the nursery all the time who need help with houseplants. They really want to buy a string of pearls, but they've killed like 8. So pretty much exact same care as the string of bananas. They need to stay dry. They need to dry out between waterings and not sit in water. The ones in the nursery right now, I'm probably watering twice a week, but that's because it's hot in our greenhouse and they're getting a lot of light from up top, even though we do have shade cloth. But you'll probably want to water yours like once a month, maybe twice a month. So again, they don't like to stay wet. Make sure they're in a pot with proper drainage and really, really good soil, maybe with an extra amount of perlite mixed in when you do go to repot it, because they can be sassy if they get wet. And then lastly, this fish hook cactus, sometimes called an orchid cactus. Ooh, this is another one you're going to look at and you're going to say, she's going to want all the sun in the world. Not true at all. I actually put mine outside to get some rain. It was already getting some direct morning sunlight. I put mine out when it rained, forgot to pull it in for like an hour, and all the inside leaves burned. So what I did with it, once those leaves burned, I kind of cut the ends back where they were still green, let it callus over, and then stuck them in a new pot and they rooted pretty quickly. So I had a nice new plant. And like I said, we'll talk about propagating a lot of these. One of the great things about trailing plants is they're very easy to propagate. You can cut on them. If you wanted to be a hairdresser one day and you never made it that far, you can treat your plant as that beautiful head of hair that you thought maybe you'd be cutting on one day.
Move over, Chia Pet.
Or yes, it's like a really, really fancy and a little bit more expensive Chia Pet. So
With wild hairstyles.
So we just took a little tour of all the plants I have over here. I might have missed a few. We do have a lot, but there are so many great options for trailing houseplants. And like I mentioned earlier, so many things you can do with them. Hang them from your ceiling, put them on a shelf. People will take pothos and kind of tack them and run them along their wall or across their ceiling and let them drape. My string of hearts is like a cascading waterfall curtain coming through my kitchen into my dining room. So you can really get wild. And then I kind of touched on my favorites, but just to talk about my favorite one more time, string of hearts, to me, this is one of the easier ones for me personally to take care of. I'm good with succulents and cacti. I don't overwater, so it fits with my my plant care area, what I can do, what I love. And then Scindapsus exotica, another one. These will take over. They like to be really snug in their pots. They don't like a lot of room. And look at those leaves. I mean, I think this one is like just about the size of my hand. Wow. So cool. And then lastly, Epiphyllum, which is similar to this one that I have in front. I've got a curly leafed one that's just so cool. They will bloom. It's a little bit hard to get them to bloom. They have to be in their pot for a really long time, and then have kind of cool nights, warm days for them to bloom. But those are my top 3 trailers: String of Hearts, Epiphyllum, and Exotica Scindapsus. So let's talk about how to propagate a lot of these little babies that I got in front of me. So like I talked on earlier, I would say the easiest one to propagate is going to be Tradescantia. And I will stick it in water with other things that I'm trying to prop. Maybe some, like I've propped Rose of Sharon before, and I'll put this in there. In my mind, it helps accelerate those new roots pushing out. So it's something that I use. But when you go to propagate, and we're going to take this as a little cutting because she actually does need a haircut. So who's ready to go into like basically science class now? Ooh. Tyler, how are you doing over there?
I'm keeping it horticulturally cool.
Oh, Tyler just got back from taking some great plant tours.
I sure did.
Went and saw a pretty rose garden. All right, so you see this. So if your plant starts to get out of control, you're like, it's getting so long, I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to have to get rid of it. No, absolutely not. You're just going to take it, find a nice long stem, maybe one that's leggy. It could be one that's damaged. Take a nice clean cut. So we've got that. Then what I like to do is strip off the bottom leaves. And I would normally even take this side branch off. You can stick this in water as well. Then you're going to put it in water. You're going to want it to cover these little like segments. And we'll look at a pothos in a minute that's going to have the nodes really pushing out. But you want to get that under the water. And I would say at least 2 of them in the water. With some other ones, you want like 3 to 5, which sounds a little wild, but stick it in water and it'll start rooting. And actually with these, what I do is I'll take that cutting and then just stick it in the dirt. And that Tradescantia will usually just root in the dirt, no rooting hormone, no special care, just walking away.
So easy.
So easy. Easy peasy. I mean, you have so many plants. People love to take cuttings of that and give them to friends. My grandmother's, we all got cuttings off of hers. So we all have a little piece of her Tradescantia. Now moving on to propping a pothos. So if you notice on this one, and I'm not going to cut on this one because she does not need a haircut yet. As much as I love giving them haircuts, we won't do this one. So I think we can see it in the camera. These nodes, you see where looks like there's roots already starting to form. So if I was going to propagate this one, I would probably take it like 4 nodes down. So I would cut about here, snip it off, remove these lower leaves, 2 to 3 leaves, and then stick that in water. You kind of have two options with this one. I usually do water with my pothos with my Scindapsus when I'm propagating those. And removing those leaves, you don't want that plant to be pushing a lot of energy into the leaves and keeping them alive. You want it to start focusing on the roots. So that's why we're going to go ahead and remove those lower leaves that it doesn't need anymore. So stick that in water. It can take like almost a month to start rooting, but when you start seeing the white roots start shooting out of the side, that's about time for you to go ahead and stick it in a potting medium. You don't want to leave it in water too long. I have some plants that I left in water way too long. They get used to being in water, and then it's too much of a shock when you go to transplant them into soil. And then they also can sometimes get waterlogged and just die in the water. So don't leave them in the water too long, as much as you probably want to, because it looks cool. You might want to go ahead and repot it once it starts to get like those secondary side roots. So when you go to pot it up, you'll want to put it just in a potting medium. I usually will mix a little bit of perlite in mine, and then water it thoroughly. Now, when you're propagating it and then when you're repotting it, you don't want to stick it in a lot of full sun. I use a north-facing window for all my propagations, as far as like leafy propagations go, so it doesn't get too hot and too stressed. Keep it fairly watered. You don't want to let it dry out because it's really trying to work out those new roots and move into the soil. And then you'll have your new houseplant after a month or two. So exciting. Another option you can do with pothos and other things is rooting hormone. So you'll take the cutting the same way I talked about earlier. And I don't have any rooting hormone in here, unfortunately, today because we are sold out at the nursery. It sells very quickly. But you'll take your cutting. I'll usually stick mine in a little bit of water, like dampen it, knock off that excess water, put it around in the rooting hormone, knock off the excess rooting hormone, which is like a white powder. That's what I use. And then stick it in a soil mix. With the rooting hormone method, I'll usually use 1 part like coconut coir or peat moss, and then other half perlite. And then keep it in a dish with some water, stick that in there. I've had better luck sometimes with the rooting hormone. It can just be a little bit more work than just using water. Also with the water, people always say to change it out. I'm terrible at changing out my water, but if you want to keep it fresh, change that water out. So those are 2 good options for propagating a pothos, Scindapsus, philodendron. All of those are going to, it's going to be pretty much the same method. Questions, Tyler? I'm going to drink some drink.
It does not look like we have any still. So
wow.
I think you're doing well.
Thank you, everyone. Just doing great. It's getting toasty in here. I'm going to roll up my sleeves, show off those muscles. Okay. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about propagating like the epiphyllum, Rhipsalis, and more like succulent cacti trailers. They don't have the nodes, or a lot of them don't, like the pothos has and the philodendron, and Hoya also has that as well. That's going to prop the same way. So with these, I would take a cutting probably halfway down the leaf. You don't want to take like the very tip. I know it can be kind of scary to cut on your plant, especially when it looks like it's just going to, be a sad straight cut once you do it. But I would take it about halfway down the plant, let this callus over a little bit. When you let it callus over, you want to do that because if you take that cutting and then go ahead and try to stick it in a potting medium to root it, you really run the risk of rotting it. Since it hasn't had a chance to dry out, it's going to get too much moisture into the stem of the plant, thus rotting the plant. So stick it in kind of a cool, dark-ish place to callus over. Some will callus over in a matter of like 48 hours. Some, I give it like a good 2 weeks. And then I'll use rooting hormone a lot with my succulent cacti cuttings. So same thing, get it a little moist, stick it in the rooting hormone, and then put it in some dry soil mix. Now with this, you don't need to keep it as wet as the leafy props that we were talking about. I'll usually put it in the soil, water it once, and then let the soil dry out almost completely in between watering it. With that rooting hormone, I've had a pencil cactus that rooted in probably like a week. It was insane. It can be done without rooting hormone. It usually will just take a little bit longer and you might not have as high of a success rate as you would using that. So same thing with Rhipsalis. You can take that cutting, stick it in that rooting hormone, put it in a potting medium, and you'll have a new plant. So Like we talked about earlier, these are great, very versatile, very fun. You can do so many things with them. They're easy to propagate. They're easy to decorate your house with. They give you more space for more plants, which is always a fantastic thing because you can hang them from up high. So trailing houseplants are just, I mean, they're a joy. I love them. I have a bunch. There's so many different kinds. And then lastly, we're just going to talk about some troubleshooting things with trailing houseplants. As far as houseplants go, they all are susceptible to pests. I've noticed with the leafy trailers and the smaller succulents that have the leaves coming out of the stem, mealybugs absolutely love them. So if you were to bring mealybugs into your house, which can be done by introducing a new plant into your home, but it can also come in from outside. Even if you haven't brought a new plant in, these pests, these bugs are everywhere. So they could come in on your clothes, on your pets, just in the air if there's a breeze that has some bugs. So it's always a good idea to regularly check, the bottoms of your leaves, the inside of your plant, just to make sure there's no bugs, pests that might cause some damage. So mealybugs, I say, is the number one. And if you're not sure what a mealybug is, they're these nasty little white bugs. It sometimes looks like a little tiny piece of cotton candy on your plant. Or then the more mature bugs will be a little bit bigger. Looks like a really flat, small, roly-poly. So that's mealybugs. They can be taken care of pretty easily. You can use rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip. Just dip that in the rubbing alcohol. It kills the bug on contact. You can use insecticidal soap or neem oil. Those will kill those bugs on contact. You will have to keep retreating them because it doesn't actually treat the infestation. It just kills the pest on contact. The other one that I see a lot on all these types of plants is spider mites, which can be a little bit harder to find once that infestation starts. But you'll notice maybe some yellowing on your pothos leaves, on your scindapsus, on your philodendron. That's from them literally sucking the life out of your plant. They feed on the juices of that plant. There'll be little webbing on the underside of the leaves. And also you'll notice these little bitty white spiders or white specks. So that will more than likely be spider mites. Again, they're about the same level. Easiness, is that a word, to get rid of. Like mealybugs, you can do rubbing alcohol, neem oil, just wipe your leaves down. It'll remove them. If your infestation is pretty bad, you also always have the option of using some more toxic treatments. You can do a systemic treatment or use something like 8. But I usually suggest trying to start with non-toxic organic treatments before you move to something that's a little more wild. And then just to mention a few other ones, thrips will sometimes get on leafy plants. They're pretty terrible and hard to see, but fairly rare. I haven't had a lot of customers come in here with thrips. I've, knock on wood, never had any on my house plants. Scale is another one in whitefly. But all of these can be treated the same. It doesn't mean your house plant is dead. But yeah, we'll open the floor to see if there's any questions. So I'll hand it over to Tyler.
We got one from Miss Miriam Mims, actually.
Yay!
That is not exactly indoor trailing plant related. She was asking about Rose of Sharon, propagating that. That would be somewhat similar, right?
It's similar. I find that they're really easy to propagate. They're one of the most hardy shrubs in my mind. I have propagated them in water. I've also had a lot of success rate propagating them just in a potting mix. I don't even know what the potting mix was. I just took a cutting off of some newer growth. I took it down. It was probably about, what is this, like a foot, maybe half a foot?
Around a foot.
Around a foot.
8 inches to a foot.
8 inches to a foot. Scientist Tyler over there. Nailing it. Strip off those lower leaves, and then I will just stick it in a pot, and it will root a lot of the time without rooting hormone and without, being super careful and, trying to figure out what kind of soil to put it in. And it also, I've had success rooting them in water. And then I've let those little sticks, once they start pushing new growth and turning into their own little shrub. I've had one that I let sit in a pot outside for about 3 years before I put it in the ground, and it was totally fine. So they're kind of like weeds, beautiful, beautiful weeds. And I love Rose of Sharon. So great question.
Yes. If you have any other questions, now is the time to ask. Otherwise, we will be wrapping up shortly. So we want to thank you for being a part of our webinar program this spring. As we move into summer, we'll have some more content to kick out there to you. So stay tuned. In time there.
We have a lot of great webinars coming up. I don't think we've solidified our schedule yet, but it will be out soon.
Yes, and if you aren't signed up already, you can sign up for the Bates Nursery Botanical Boot Camp webinar newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter that we send out at the beginning of every month with kind of a recap on the prior months and some archive posts and then what's coming up.
And if you ever want something covered, you can always message us through the boot camp newsletter. There should be a link. Or you can DM us on Facebook, on Instagram. If there is, like I said, some subject you want us to talk about, we can absolutely try to make that work. But thank you for joining me in this webinar. Meet me in my trailer, the joy of trailing houseplants. We cover just a fraction of what is out there. There are so many, but like I said, they're a great addition to your houseplant collection. They can really create more space for you to bring in other plants that can't necessarily hang. And they're just fun. They're easy. They're a great kid-friendly plant if you have a child who maybe wants to get into plants, because like I said, you can cut on them. You can give them haircuts. It's not bad for the plant. It actually is good, and it will promote new healthy growth. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you again soon.